What's up, guys? Welcome back to the JP and Trav Show on the JP and Trav YouTube channel. As always, it's your host with the most, JP. And my co-host, Travis J. Davidson, is actually at a scrimmage still right now. He's hoping to get home here pretty soon, but he's waiting on an interview. And he may even pop on in the car. But he's waiting on an interview from a player. I'll let him disclose who that is once he gets on. And if he never does, then I'll disclose it later. But, the one still has done it. So, but, man, we are so blessed and honored to have who is to my right, the man, the myth, and the legend, Captain 405. Cap, how you doing tonight, brother?
Doing good, JP. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a good time. Always a good time with the crew here over at the show, but always a better time when we get somebody like yourself on, somebody who's had, a little bit of a meteoric rise, if you will, in this industry. And so definitely excited with everything you have going on. And I'll give you the floor for a little bit just to talk about, some of the stuff that you've been doing with the Captain's Log and different stuff like that. So how did, you start to get started with all this?
Well, I guess if you want to go back to last October or so, I had been running my own business for a few years, and football is something that has been in my blood because my family is full of coaches, going back to my granddad and my dad in Texas high school football and that scene. But I had kind of been removed from it for a little while, doing my own thing. It's always something that has been of interest to me, and I'd kept up with it and have a lot of friends involved in it, obviously. But I've always been intrigued by recruiting and started following it closer last fall, and found the RDS Discord, and that was kind of the first community that I was a part of, and really started to get more heavily involved in following it. And there are a lot of connections that I have in the Texas high school football scene, and friends that are coaches and admin and people like that. And so it kind of naturally fell to me to have some information that was relevant on a few different recruitments that were going on for the 23 cycle. And got some permission to share different things from different people, and started dropping information, and that kind of snowballed, and it really kind of took over. It's something that I really have enjoyed getting involved in, and making a bigger part of what I do and who I am. Gotten to meet a lot of really cool people, and make a lot of really good connections. So that's been a really good upside to it. And I think it was probably last April, or last April. It was April or May this year when I started first thinking about the idea of starting a site and trying to get that going, and just kind of been slowly working on that over the last few months, and got to a point a couple of weeks ago where it was ready to go live, and pushed the big red button, as it were.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's been so fun getting to see, you bring, just what you do to the Twitter sphere, and, to the insider group, if you will. One thing, Cap, I've always appreciated about you is that you're real, man. Like, you're no nonsense, and you certainly will hold yourself accountable if something goes awry. But at the same time, you try to be as transparent as you can be. That's, I think, something I appreciate about you. I know a lot of people will continue to appreciate about you. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you go over to the Crimson Captain as well, and get everything that's going on over there, the Captain's Logs, everything like that. That he drops great notes on recruiting, great notes on fall camp, which we'll get to here in a little bit as well. But guys, we obviously have a lot to talk about on today's show. In 1 week's time ago, we were sitting here probably expecting that Williams Nwaneri was going to be a Sooner at this point. Obviously, that did not happen. He chose Missouri, his home state school. And there are theories out there. People have said one thing or another about why he chose to do this, why he chose to do that. But he's a 17-year-old kid, right? Who felt like he wanted to make the decision he felt was best for him. I have no problem with that. I'm not gonna lie and cap out. I'll hand this off to you. I was a little salty when I saw the picture of him up in Tulsa that Trav posted when he had the Oklahoma gloves and the Oklahoma cleats. But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, understandable. I had some people, you probably saw this in the Discord a little bit earlier, but I was telling people in the Discord that if it makes you salty or makes you a little bit upset as an OU fan, just think about the fact that Missouri fans hate it. And so, you know, and imagine if you were in a Missouri fan's shoes and the number one player in the country committed to your school, and then a few days later he's on the field wearing another school's gear. That's a little bit of a thing that makes you pause. But yeah, I can definitely see from an OU fan's perspective where it's a little bit of a twisting of the knife. But and this is not to throw any unfounded hope out there, but OU is definitely still going to try and recruit him and see where things can go. As things stand right now, I don't necessarily anticipate that that's going to be a successful effort, but we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. It's a long time between now and signing day.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously anything can happen. I know that a lot of people's theories, right, are we could push till early signing day, and as far as I understand it, the staff would still recruit him. Obviously, the Missouri doesn't have the Oklahoma policy, and so who knows? Maybe he makes it up for a visit. I don't know. We'll see. But we're gonna definitely make sure we get a great defensive line class. I know that. I know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes on making sure that happens. So even if we don't get him, man, we still got Stone, Smith, obviously working on McKinley, and so hopefully, we can round some of those guys out and finish out with a top tier defensive line class.
It's not a an unreasonable amount of copium or a bad perspective to think about the fact that a defensive line class of Nigel Smith and David Stone and Danny Okoye would be a very, very good class, one of the better ones
Yeah,
in the country. And also, if you look at the rankings of the last 20 years, uh, one of our guys over at the Crimson Captain put out a comparison of the rankings of defensive line classes at OU over the last 20 years. And if you just go with Jaden Jackson, Nigel Smith, David Stone, Danny Okoye, that group would represent one of, if not the highest ranked defensive line classes in the last 20 years. Just to give you a little bit of perspective there. Yes, there was an opportunity to get Williams Nwaneri and possibly to get Dominic McKinley and push that into the stratosphere. But even without those two in McKinley and Nwaneri, the group that OU is currently leading for or trending well for at this point is still going to be right up there with the very best that OU's got in the last couple decades.
yeah, and that's what I think people need to realize. Like, it's been a long time since we've even been consistently in the running for this many. Like, I know people are like, well, what about Dindy and what about and all this stuff? It's like we were seriously talking about potentially landing 3, 4, 5-star linemen like that. When's the last time OU's been in a conversation like that? And it is because of who we have as well. And so obviously the hope is we finish out with Stone, Smith, an Okoye, and maybe McKinley is a surprise. I don't know, but I do want to let me pop this up here. Let's address this. Stone is a Miami lock. I have readily said, and y'all know me, like on the X sphere, that's what we call it now. Me and Trav are resident sunshine pumpers, and I'll wear that proudly. I'm not a negative person. I'm not just gonna believe nothing until I see it. However, I will jump. I'm not gonna say I'm jumping on the Doomium bandwagon, but if we do not land David Stone, like if David Stone does not come to Oklahoma, I may just be quiet for a minute. I just might be quiet because, like, it to me would be almost inexcusable to lose David Stone at this point. But that's just me. How do you feel?
I definitely feel the same way. I mean, if there, I don't like to ever say that there's a single recruit that is a must get or is the make or break for a class. But if there ever was one, or if there ever could be one for OU, David Stone would probably be it because he's a defensive tackle, which is the biggest area of need, especially as you get ready to go to the SEC. He's in your backyard. He's from Del City. He clearly has wanted to go to OU for a very long time. He's tried to commit a few times, you know. So everything that everything points toward him being a Sooner, and if you're not able to land him, then that's really a big blow to the program. And really, it doesn't matter. The why doesn't matter to me. The effect is the same no matter what the why is, as far as
Yeah,
why you wouldn't land him, because uh, you know you're missing again at an area of need. You're missing a guy with that kind of talent in your backyard, which doesn't happen every year, and that kind of impact on your program is real. It doesn't matter, if somebody in his family wanted him to go, or what kind of circumstance surrounds that decision. You really can't, as a coaching staff, you really can't afford to leave any stone unturned and pull out all the stops. If you're going to spend a larger amount of money than you might otherwise want to, this is the guy you do it for.
yeah,
And there's really no other way around that. Good news is every indication that I have and everything that I've heard tells me that OU is fully on board with that mindset and has done and is doing everything that they need to do in order to make sure that that commitment is secured and it's effective from everything that I've heard.
yeah,
The one variable that I have been made aware of, and this has been something that's been on an ongoing circumstance there in this recruitment, is that he does have family that would like him out of state,
yeah,
and right now Miami is kind of Michigan State used to be the one that they were kind of pushing towards, and there's been a couple others during this cycle. Miami is kind of the current one right now. Uh, but I spoke to some Miami sources over the last couple of days, and there was definitely a push by these members of his family to encourage him to go there. They've clearly expressed their desire for David to go to Miami. But at the end of the day, even the Miami people believe that that's going to be set aside at some point, and he will ultimately end up at OU. OU is beyond confident that they have built up a lead for him and that they're in a safe position.
yeah,
Now, again, we're dealing with a 5-star defensive lineman, and really a 5-star at any position, because of how in demand their services are and the kind of money that we're talking about here. You can't necessarily rule out anything. But if you're asking me to objectively read the signs and filter the information that's being sent in through different sources, that's kind of where it lands, and that you do have some variables there that could change the equation and affect the decision. But if you're looking at everything in total, it still points towards Stone being at OU.
yeah, yep. And that's why I think at the end of the day, if we're able to allow him to be pried somewhat out of our hands, and I get it, guys. Like, and I'm one of those people that I'm very understanding. Like, I can understand a Tristan Lay a couple years ago with the uncle in Atlanta and going to Clemson. I can kind of understand a, obviously this is recent, but a Williams Nwaneri whose mom, you know, decides, hey, you know what, I'd rather you, be closer to home, and that's okay. Like, people's parents are allowed to, make decisions like that. We shouldn't be mad at them for that. But at the end of the day, too, for me, one question I would have is, what's the reasoning for not wanting David Stone in Oklahoma? And maybe he gets in trouble in Oklahoma City and Del City, right, when he's back, and maybe that's a big piece of it. Which those are factors some people don't always consider. To them, it's as simple as it's cut and dry. It's, well, mom just didn't like Oklahoma. She didn't like this. She didn't like that. But you know what? Like, when you have a kid, like, you don't want your baby, especially when your baby is, a top 10 player in the nation and is, potentially able to make a lot of money now and also in the future. You don't want them to mess up his future with the wrong crowd. And so, I guess maybe Cap, the push for OU and OU staff is like, hey, we're gonna, whoever these cats are, like, they're gonna be cut out at the end of the day, because we want to get on mom's side, and we want, Stone to be here. And at the end of the day, too, maybe Stone says, forget, what anybody else wants. It's about what I want. Because if we've seen any pattern of that, I mean, how many times has it been in Oklahoma? How many times has he been on campus?
I would have lost count. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been, probably upwards of 15 to 20 just that I know about. And there's
Yeah.
been a ton, there's been a ton of times where he's back in town visiting family. Every time he's back in town, he's up there. And so if you want to come back over the last couple of years, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Just as far as how many times he's been there.
Yeah. somebody somebody just texted me and said that we need to invite, or DM me on Twitter and said that we need to invite all the moms to the women's clinic every year, because the moms seem to not like very much. So I don't know, but yeah. I mean, he commits next Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Next Saturday. I mean, literally 9 days away. If this is like, I understand people thought we had a big lead for Nwaneri, but the lead that we theoretically have for Stone is so, like, Grand Canyon wide. It would even make me, as I said, it would make me a resident sunshine pumper. I would probably have to put a beanie on, some glasses, the next JP and Trav show after, if we didn't get him, because I wouldn't know where to go.
Yeah. And I understand there's kind of a natural pull to compare these different recruitments, especially the ones like the defensive line where it's the same position, you know. But I think it's good to remind ourselves that every circumstance, every recruitment is very different and has very different variables
Yeah.
surrounding it and affecting it. So yes, there's a similarity as far as the fact that this is another defensive lineman that we're trying to convince to come to OU, but at the same time, it's not nearly the same situation. Not the same family dynamic, not the same geographical location that you're dealing with, not the same past as far as Stone's history with OU and his desire to come to OU. He's got family connections there. There's a whole different set of things that are surrounding it and affecting it that make it very different. But challenge is still the same, and the impact is still the same if things go sideways.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's go ahead and get to fall camp. I know a lot of people are really ready, Cap, to get to some Sooner football, especially with all that the last week has brought. So just talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing from fall camp. And then, after that, we'll get into a little bit of our schedule as well. I've got a couple questions we want to ask, not only to the chat, but to you as well, about how you feel about certain pieces of the schedule. And hopefully Trav can pop on by then. Hopefully he gets a chance. But anyways, go ahead, Cap. Let us know what you're hearing about fall camp.
Well, I'll start with the wide receiver position, because coming into camp, this was one of the areas that I had in my mind as a possible weakness on the team, or just a lot of unknowns that led to not really knowing what we're going to get when we get to week one of the season. And so there was a really strong need for certain guys like Andrew Anthony to show up and really start to make a leap and show that he could be a major piece of the puzzle in that room. He wanted to see what Jaquez Petaway could do coming in as a summer enrollee and a true freshman. and on down the list. And I think that when you look at what's gone on in the scrimmages so far and how they've backed those performances up with just day-to-day practice performance and activity, there's been a lot of encouraging signs in the wide receiver room. And what was a question mark coming out of spring going into fall camp, I think could be an area, I don't know if strength is the right word, but definitely players that could step up and have playmaking ability, which is a very important element here as you get into the season. You need to have guys that can get open on a 3rd and 10 or a 3rd and 8 and make a catch. Jaden Gibson is another one that I know there's been a lot of hand wringing about. He's had his issues with drops and things like that in his short career so far. But he has had a consistent performance after performance in fall camp. And in the scrimmages, he's backed that up and really extended that. Now, I don't think his issues with drops are completely gone. As a matter of fact, no, there was one in the last scrimmage that kind of cropped up, but still based on his overall performance in camp, the coaches I know have been very encouraged with how he's come along. Then you've got Jaquez Petaway, who, whenever a true freshman comes in, you don't necessarily want to count on them as somebody who's going to be a starter or even a major piece, but he's one of those rare ones who's got the kind of ability and the work ethic to go along with it from everything that I've heard, that's going to put him in a position to get some playing time. And then with Nick Anderson, the thing that we've been waiting on that you hear no matter who talks about him is we've been waiting on him to be healthy. And scrimmage performances where he has been healthy and ready to go, he is really showing that ability to where I think he's going to be able to challenge pretty much every secondary on the schedule, including Texas, just based on some of the things that he's put on tape so far in fall camp. So there's a lot to be encouraged about just in that room in particular. And so there's a lot of excitement where, I think going into fall camp, you just didn't really know what you were going to get. The other area that I've heard a lot of really good talk and buzz about is the offensive line, especially the first team offensive line. And it's been a pretty consistent starting group in Walter Rouse at left tackle, Savion Byrd at left guard, Ram at center. And then at right guard, you've got McCade Matager. And then at right tackle is Tyler Guyton. Coming into fall camp, I had some sources at OU who were pretty confident that Matager might be in danger of losing his starting spot or losing a spot to somebody like Jake Taylor or Troy Everett, or somebody like that who could come in and really push him. But I know from a few sources he really pushed himself this offseason to get better. And in some areas very specifically, namely his footwork and just how he uses his hands and some of his technique. There was a lot of emphasis for him personally on his own to work on those things and improve those things. The other thing that's really helping him, from what I've heard, is that when you go back to last season, I think most of his work was at left guard, and they have moved him over to right guard this year, and that is a more natural position for him to play. And you hear a lot of talk about offensive linemen and some of the difficulties in switching from left side to right side or right side to left. And the best way that I can think of to describe this is think about the difference between somebody, if you're right hand or left hand dominant, right? You might be able to use either one for a task or something, but you're going to have a naturally more strength and power behind, one side or the other.
Yeah.
And when you're playing offensive line, if you don't have the kind of punch and power and the ability to gather yourself at your base and operate in a powerful stance and have your full strength behind you at the side that you're using, it takes a lot of time to retrain yourself if you even can. And even I think once you get yourself retrained, you hear a lot of guys talking about the fact that they just don't quite have the same kind of effect, the same kind of punch with one hand and then might the other. And so one of the things that I've heard about Matthias' performance in camp so far is that he looks like a different player as far as his ability to move, the kind of power and technique that he's using. So obviously, you want to see that translate to playing a different opponent and in a real game. So we'll see when the rubber meets the road exactly what happens. But I know there was a lot of, I think, disappointment initially just because at times Matthias did struggle last year. And so when you hear that he's still in the starting lineup, there might be a little bit of a sense of worry among Senior Nation about is that really going to work out? Is that going to be best? And I think that just based on what I've heard and some things even that I've seen, there seems to be a potential for him to really be improved, and that I don't think you can underestimate what it's going to do to have him playing next to a guy like Tyler Guyton, who could be a first round pick in the NFL draft. So overall, I think there's a lot of room for optimism. If you go back to the Cheez-It Bowl performance, the Sooners offensive line, even with a bunch of young guys and kind of patchwork that they were working with, they still ran for over 250 yards and 4.2 yards a carry against that FSU defensive line, which had several NFL guys, future draft picks and a really strong athletic front seven. So lots to be encouraged about, lots to be looking forward to. I think if you're thinking about the Sooners and their running game, and that doesn't even get into the defense and and the kind of depth now that you have at secondary with Peyton Bowen and Kendall Dolby and Robert Spears Jennings, who have really made leaps and bounds coming in and then combining with Billy Bowman and then Reggie Pearson, who's come in as the transfer. So there's lots to look forward to, lots to be very encouraged about. The other thing that I'll point out that I've talked about on the site a little bit is the linebacker position. And coming into fall camp and coming out of spring, there was still some question, I think, about Jaron Kanek and whether or not he was going to be able to make that leap. But over the summer, every report, every indication is that he put in the time that he had to in order to understand that position and to learn how to play linebacker. And it really blew away the coaches just as far as how much work he put in and then seeing that affect his play on the field in fall camp. The other thing that's happened here recently that I think there's been some talk about in a couple of different places, I know I mentioned it on the site, is that they have switched at least most of the time. I don't know that it's a full position switch, but they have switched Danny Stutzman over to Mike, and Jaron Kanek is playing the will. And if you want a little bit of indication of what that could look like, they had that alignment, or they had Stutzman playing Mike in the bowl game, and that was one of Danny's best games of the year. So he is more naturally that kind of player that fits that position. Whenever TD Roof got injured last year, if I'm remembering correctly, the plan initially was to have TD Roof play Will and Danny was going to play Mike, and they had to switch that up at the last second after Roof got injured, and it really kind of messed with their plans for the linebacker position for the 2022 season. But part of them making that switch, I believe, is Kanek and making that improvement. And I think if you're a Senior fan, you have to really be excited about what that could look like, because I think it really moves Danny into the position that he is most natural at and where he's had the most success so far in his career.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Here's a question for you that I think I've actually always wanted to ask you personally, but I'll ask you right here. Defensively, who do you feel like is going to be the most important to our success this year? Do you feel like there's one player? Do you feel like it's a group of players? What's your opinion on that?
It's a really good question. I think that I would point to a group and then an individual. the defensive line has to be able to show an improved ability to rush the passer and to maintain the line of scrimmage or to push the line of scrimmage back as opposed to getting blown off the ball, which was an issue last year much of the time. And then the individual player that I would point to that I think is probably the most critical outside of the defensive line group is Billy Bowman. Whenever he was out injured last year, the defense struggled even more so than it did with him in there, and he to me was the glue that held that together in a lot of ways. And so, if you can get improved pass rush and run stopping ability on the defensive line, and keep Billy Bowman healthy, then I think that's going to go a long way towards an improved defensive unit for you.
I really like that. That was good. Those of you who are in the chat, go ahead and answer that question for yourself. Who to you is going to be kind of the most important for us this year defensively? And if you want to say your offensive, thing, you can too. I'll go ahead and put that up on here as well. Cap, what are your thoughts on the team? Obviously, again, just continuing with this fall camp theme. Are we going to get do you think we'll get a depth chart soon? I know we're wrapping some things up here this week. Do you think things will be solidified if they're not already?
I think it'll be a few days before the first game, probably that game week that you see a depth chart. I don't think they'll put one out before then. They're not really incentivized to do so, and there's a lot of battles still going on for those different positions, especially for the second cornerback spot and a couple of and both. Well, the safety position that Billy Bowman does not occupy, and the other one is the cheetah spot. I'd say I don't know if the starter is in question so much as who's running the second team there and which one of those guys looks better. But yeah, I wouldn't expect a depth chart until game week.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. Let's put a couple of these responses up. Bothroyd, as far as who they think is important to this year, Pearson and Bowman. D line is where the metal hits the meat. Yeah. DG, linebacker core as a whole. Trap House as nickelback position is vital too. Got to be. Yeah, who do you think they'll be working in a dime look? Who do you think they'll be looking at?
I think they'll be bringing in guys like Kendall Dobley and Josiah Wagner.
Yeah.
And you could see Peyton Bowen getting time in that role too. And he was in an interview that Bowen did the other day after practice. He mentioned that they're playing him at five different positions is what they've got him learning. So depending on who's playing best and what those guys are doing, I think you could see any of those three guys in Dolby, Wagner, and Bowen at the nickel.
Yeah. Bowen would be interesting at the nickel. I'd really like to see that.
He's got the speed and the athletic ability, I think, to match up with just about any receiver there. He's not just limited to safety.
Yeah.
And so he could match up pretty well, I think, with a wide variety of opponents.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what that looks like. And, man, if he can get on the field like that, what he could do with it, you never know. And, man, I just want to see him on the field personally. For me, obviously, Trav and I have talked about this a lot, but we're probably the strongest at our safety position than we've been, I don't know, in more than a decade, in my opinion. Maybe since Tony Jefferson was here. So I'm excited about it, man. I think it's going to be a good year. I really like that room too a lot. Let's talk about this schedule, man. We've been trying to go through some of the different prompts as far as our schedule this year. And one of them is, what do we think the 3 toughest games are going to be? I think the other week, I don't think it was last week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we said which 3 games are you most looking forward to? But which games do you think will be the actual three toughest games for the Sooners this year?
I'm going to pick three tough games. The first one I think has to be Texas. Obviously, it's by far the best team on the schedule, and the biggest opportunity for a loss. And then the other two that I would pick are the two teams that are new to the conference, in BYU and Cincinnati. I think that the unknown is a little bit of a factor that you have to take into account there. And they're decent teams that will beat you on a day that you don't bring your best. And so those three, if I'm going to point to three, I think those are the ones that I would point to. A sneaky one might be SMU in week 2. I don't know that SMU's quarterback is really setting the world on fire, or there's really super high expectations. But that offense as a whole can be very explosive. And so if OU's defense isn't dialed in and ready to go, that could be one where they struggle, and who knows. So there's a lot of, again, early in the season, when you're trying to get the offensive line together, and the new defensive players and all the transfers are trying to gel, and you're in that second week where you're not practicing against each other. You're in a real game with opponents that are game planning against you and scheming against you, and they've got good players on their side too. Then it could get interesting. I don't think they'll lose that game, but I think it could be more interesting than Sooner fans might want it to be that early in the season.
Wow, interesting. Well, it's definitely gonna be interesting to see what we're gonna do with those three. I mean, I agree with you, especially with Texas, man. I mean, obviously we can say till we're blue in the face that they are the most talented team in the conference. We've been able to say that in years past, but I do truly think they're on a good path with Sark, whether people want to believe that or not. I mean, obviously they've always recruited well, but their management and everything like that, I think, is better. Obviously, we still need to see them actually do it. So, I'm not going to sit here and crown them, but certainly, they're going to be our toughest test. I would probably say, man, think about this a little longer. I thought I had my three, but now I don't know. You might have flipped me. Threw me for a loop. Chat, you guys throw some of yours in there. Help me out a little bit as I think, because I think I agree with BYU. I think BYU could be tough, and they're definitely somebody that they always play well. And are we at BYU? We're at BYU, aren't we?
Yeah, it's in Provo, I believe.
Yeah, and obviously that's a beautiful place in general, but probably a tougher place to play than some people probably think, too, to be honest with you. So, yeah. I mean, you never know what can happen. I like TCU too. I mean, I know some people are down on TCU, and I certainly obviously don't think that they're going to be what they were last year, and they lost Garrett Riley, so there's a piece of that in there as well. Do we think that? Oh, go ahead, Kat.
There's a question in the chat that I'd like to address, if you don't mind. It's from Les Wilson. He says, Cat 405, a personal question, and you don't have to answer. Is there a reason you don't show your face or use your real name? And yes, there is a reason, and I'm happy to share it. So part of my ability to share information and get information from sources and put that out into the public sphere is because I have remained somewhat anonymous. Now, if you meet me in person and we shake hands and we talk, I introduce myself as who I am. And anybody who's met me knows that. That's kind of the model that I've used, or the rule of thumb that I've used outside of a certain meeting with Kerry Murdoch that has been documented and talked about. But no, the reason that I do that is because I've got a lot of friends in Texas high school football. My connections and people that I talk to and the people that give me information would prefer not for there to be an official public link back to them about who I am and who they are, and the ability to make that connection. So as long as I stay anonymous and don't use my real name, then the people that I'm connected to, the people that I talk to, that I'm friends with, they are willing to keep sharing that kind of information, and they're willing for me to share it, on my site and in public and other places. So it's a little bit of a deal that we struck early on, and I don't necessarily see that changing. But if you meet me in person and shake my hand and we sit down and shoot the breeze, then yeah, I'll tell you who I am. No problem.
Nice. All right, let's continue the questions, guys. I like that's at least nice personal question. Go ahead and ask some more questions. Whether you have questions, for Cap specifically, or if you have questions in general, let's go ahead and get into that time. I don't know that Trav is going to make it. It looks like he's been, balling out with some of these interviews. If you haven't seen, he actually was sitting in on the interview with Williams Nwaneri. And John Hoover asked some good questions, and he even asked about the gloves and the cleats, and a lot of OU fans are getting some hopium about that again. Cap, I don't know if you saw that, but a lot of
Yeah, I
them
saw that.
are like, oh man, like we might still have a shot because they're analyzing body language and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole that I am not going to go down. Now, I will say, if we get closer to signing day, or if we get to somewhere down the road, and there's legitimate indications that he is, wavering, or that OU might have a chance, then by all means, I'll pick that back up and start to report on it. But that's going to have to be very strong indications, and not just an OU source or OU side that's confident. There's going to have to be some corroboration on the Missouri side, and others, familiar with that recruitment and stuff like that. So it's not going to get picked up, at least by me, just on a whim and trying to push some hope. Because anytime a kid actually publicly commits to a school, and unless something major changes, you have to assume that that's going to be followed through on. And more often than not, that's what happens. And I would caution against maybe even trying to compare it to the Peyton Bowen situation, just because, again, I know there's been some conjecture about, maybe Nwaneri wanted to go to OU and he's not happy with the decision. I think that's maybe misplaced, at least in these initial stages. And
yeah,
while it may be true, I don't think there's anything concrete that we can point to say that that's the case, or something that we should pin hopes on. So
yeah.
just sit back and wait, see how things transpire, give OU a chance to do their thing, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Here's a good question for you, Cap, as we're, continue to talk about, this thing. And you don't have to get into it too deep if you don't want to. But was OU actually even in the top two for Williams Nwaneri?
So if he wasn't, the thing that I can say is that if OU was not in the top two, that goes against everything that OU knew to be true about where they stood, and not just OU, but Missouri people too. Missouri people were pretty sure that it was between Missouri and OU. I know that Georgia, I think, was the only school that had been pushing this notion that the recruitment was down to Georgia and Missouri. So ultimately, I don't want to pretend that I know exactly how Williams and his family were feeling, especially in those last couple of weeks after they really tightened the circle and information, and we're in that period of time that they have said, that period of time after they have said that Williams committed silently to Missouri. There may have been some kind of shift, where Georgia was the one that they were considering. I really don't know, what to make of that. Ultimately, if a kid's going to tell you in an interview that one school was ahead of another, then to some extent you just have to take him at his word and believe it. But I don't know that it really matters at the end of the day, because in recruiting, if you're not first, then you're last. So, who was second is kind of an argument to be made just to try and maybe save some face or get a little bit of comfort there. I don't know if there's much substance to trying to figure out exactly who was second and who was third.
Yeah. Yeah. Bricks, what do we know about the big homie?
Well, I'd say that in my mind, based on who I've talked to and what I know, I know he has told some people that OU leads, but he's also given Nebraska some very solid indications that they're in good standing with him. So in my mind, this is very solidly a toss-up, because Nebraska believes that they're either in the lead or in a very strong position. OU has a similar feeling about this and where it stands. Nebraska has the proximity advantage in their favor right now, and that is, I think, a bigger factor for a guy like Brooks than it might be for some kids. And so that's really something I think that you have to be mindful of. This is not something you can categorize as a done deal. I think it's probably even a reach to say that it's most likely going to be OU, but I think that OU has as good a chance as anybody, and they're definitely right there with Nebraska. And they have a lot of things going for them, because Brooks has made it very, very well known that Biedenbow and his history of development is a big factor for him, and something that he's very intrigued by. He's also a big fan of Jerry Schmidt and the strength and conditioning program at OU right now. So OU has advantages going for them for sure, but Nebraska is right there with them, and you definitely can't discount them. And so we'll just have to see where it plays out. It could go either direction at this point. Right. I would not be surprised.
Right. And you would say also at this point, I'm just paraphrasing that Les Wilson right here means what do we think about McKinley? You would say that he's a Texas kind of lean at this point in time, as we sit here at 9:49 p.m. Central Time.
Yeah, based on what I know, there's a strong push for Texas, and I think I don't think that's just his family. I think that's something that he's also starting to lean towards. If you listen to people from a few different directions, both the Texas side and people even from the LSU side that are familiar with his recruitment. Ohio State is another one that has come in and made some really strong headway with the McKinley family. So based on what I know, I think OU is second at best right now for McKinley, and I think you could make a case for Texas being in the lead and by a decent margin, and then Ohio State creeping up there to be even or better with OU. And just depending on who you talk to, I know Ohio State sources are very confident with where they stand right now. They believe they've really made a strong case and made up a lot of ground over the last week or two.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. I think I don't know that he's officially announced a commitment date of September 1st. I think that's what the family has said.
Yeah.
In a few different interviews that you see floating around out there. So we'll have to see if that gets followed through on, or if somebody like Ohio State pushes that date out or encourages them to push that date out so that they can get him on board for a visit. I'm sure OU would like to do the same, especially if they feel like they're playing from behind. But it's going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of internal debate at OU right now, I think, about just how they're going to approach this and how far they might go in the NIL game.
Yeah.
To secure him. So we'll have to see what transpires there. But there's going to be a lot of push and pull there. But if I was going to pick today, I would not really like OU's chances there for McKinley.
Yeah, which, it stinks because, as you well know, and it's another thing I appreciate about what you do with trends, instead of saying for sure, just giving trends. And that trend has seemed to go up and down, throughout the last few months. So, maybe here's to hoping that we get another shot to convince him of something else. But would love to see him here. But as you said, probably not expecting it at this point. Different situation than David Stone, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
What questions do we have, guys? Any more questions? You got about 10 or so minutes left here. Let us know anything you want to hit or talk about. Does having some in the wings keep OU from throwing the bag at other recruits?
I don't think that's how it plays out in these cases. Back in June, OU made some changes as far as their willingness to play the NIL game, and specifically on the defensive line, they made some decisions to pay some guys a little bit more than maybe they would have in the last cycle, or that had been the philosophy at that point. Now, from what I've heard, there are still some limitations and a lot of desire on the staff's part to make sure that they're not overpaying for a guy so exorbitantly that it puts their culture and locker room in jeopardy in their mind, at least as far as how that works, and how perceptions would be, and how personalities would have to be managed and stuff like that. So that's the one thing that might hold OU back from just going full out crazy like some of these other schools and paying millions of dollars to a single guy. But that doesn't mean that they're not aggressively playing the game, and even playing the game at a much higher level and to a greater degree than they were just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard and some people that I've talked to, if you've heard BV, Brent Venables, talk about his philosophy around NIL and wanting to recruit guys, wanting to be careful not to recruit guys that were simply in a bidding war and it was all about the money. That, from what I've heard, that still is his philosophy. He doesn't necessarily want guys that are just there for the money. He wants guys that are going to show up and have a different mindset and be about different things other than just who's going to pay him, pay a certain guy the most coming out of high school. So that's going to put some natural limitations, I think, on the extent to which OU is going to compete in the NIL game and how much they're going to pay out for a single player. But don't get it twisted. OU's paying kids a lot more than I think they would have in the last cycle for a number of different reasons. But they still have that overarching philosophy. They're not going to empty both barrels necessarily on a single player and risk that culture. That is still the most important thing to Brent Venables, at least, and he'll be very careful about that.
Yeah. And as you guys saw, just a few minutes ago, the man, the myth, and the other legend rebranded himself as Scrimmage Trav. As you know, we had lots of different Travs on here. Trav, how you doing, brother? What's up?
All the Barbie movie got me, thinking about all the different roles that I am. There's Scrimmage Trav, there's Power Outage Trav.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff. But sorry I'm so late, everybody. I was at the Lee Summit North and Union scrimmage. The timing of these scrimmages with multiple teams is very interesting. So you have basically two halves, basically two quarters played against every team, kind of a round robin style. Got to catch up with Devon Jordan. Got to catch up with Isaiah Mosey, Kamari Moore, and Williams Nwaneri. And yes, his OU cleats and OU gloves looked beautiful.
Yeah.
Trying to stir up some trouble.
Yeah, we chatted about the gloves and the cleats, but
I knew it would be what people would notice, and I was like, I can't say that in the tweet,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I'm not trying to I wasn't trying to point it out, but I mean, he's a big old dude with big old hands and big old feet. They stick out. So
They can see it.
yeah, everybody caught wind of that, and On3 even messaged me and asked if they could use the photo and credit me. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah.
100%.
But
Yeah.
hey, you don't wear shoes and cleats, or you don't wear cleats and gloves to a school that finished third. I'll just say that. They weren't Georgia gloves and shoes, I promise you.
Yeah, I have no comment on that. You never know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Believe what y'all want, but, proof is in the pudding. Trav, let's catch you up a little bit. Obviously, we've talked about Williams Nwaneri, and you were just with him. You just saw him and listened to him. We talked a little bit about fall camp. Cap gave us a little bit of an update, if you will. But one thing I did want to ask you, is from our scheduling thing we did a couple weeks ago. What do you think are our 3 toughest games moving forward to this season?
3 toughest games. I think the obvious choice for number 1 is Texas. They're the most talented team that we'll face. Add to that it's a rivalry game. There's not a lot of explanation that needs to go into why I think Texas is the toughest. After that, man, it's kind of dealer's choice, isn't it? I think after that, call me crazy, but I think Kansas is our next toughest game. I think Jalen Daniels, I think he is the best quarterback that we will face, including alleged first-round pick Quinn Ewers. I think Jalen Daniels is really special. I think Kansas, Leopold's been doing a great job up there. It's their homecoming game. It's on the road. It's a team that, no matter how well they're playing, it's really hard to get up for Kansas, just because historically it's just been such a one-sided, affair, and without any in-state implications or anything like that. So I think Kansas, oddly enough, might be our second toughest game of the year, and then give me TCU on a short week. TCU on a short week. I know they lost a ton of talent. They lost their Heisman candidate quarterback. They lost their offensive coordinator. They lost their Thorpe Award winner. They lost the 4th most draft picks that any college did, which is weird to say because preseason nobody would have said that. But they were also the benefactors of a lot of balls that bounced their way, right? They didn't play all the starting quarterbacks, or they injured the starting quarterbacks mid-game. They had the walk-off field goal, against Baylor, literally as time expired. The Texas game was very, very close. Texas shot themselves in the foot late. So, every undefeated regular season, you're going to need some breaks. But it seems like TCU caught 3 or 4 breaks. And then they go on and beat Michigan, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So, anyways, keep in mind, they caught lightning in a bottle. They were a first-year staff last year, too. And now one of their first-year staffers is already gone. So they still are kind of getting used to some things, too, up there, and they're going to have to learn a new offense. I'm not a big Kendall Briles guy. I don't think he's actually been that impressive. I mean, if you look at his Arkansas offenses, well, I mean, cool. I think of the Briles family, I will take Jeff Lebby, 7 days a week, twice on Sunday, over Kendall Briles. And again, when you look at his production, I don't think it's really that big. And that's why I found it interesting that TCU took that swing on him. I think they might have been able to get a better option, even though the Briles name is still decent in Texas, high school recruiting circles. But yeah, I think I'm going Texas, Kansas, and then Texas Christian to close out the year.
Nice. Cap, will you remind me what yours were?
Yeah, mine were Texas and then Cincinnati and BYU.
Cincinnati. Yeah. Yep. I think I landed on TCU and BYU as well, along with Texas. So we all agree on Texas, for sure. That's a no-brainer, without a doubt. Guys, let's do a couple more Q&As as we have Travis here for a few more minutes, and then we'll get this show on the road, even though Travis is actually on the road.
Yeah, sorry everybody. It really was. I was going to get video, and then Brandon wanted me to get some quotes and whatnot, and I was like, man, like the Missouri guys were cool, obviously getting some videos and stuff, but me being a Union High School graduate, and those guys all knowing, J. Rowe, and they all trained together with Gentry and Pat Field, all these guys throughout the years. I was like, and Coach Fred, I wanted to talk to him, so I was like, I needed to stick around in that game. I thought it was going to be over earlier, and I was literally walking onto the field to go get the interview from Devon, and the announcer goes, and that's the end of the first half. I was like, no!
Ooh.
George Stoya was there, too. I looked at George, and I was like, this is the never-ending scrimmage, bro. This is ridiculous. Because I got there at like 5:30. I'm like, what are we doing here? So, long evening for me.
Man.
But I'll tell you what, Isaiah Mosey, that boy good.
He can go.
Like, really good. Like, I was talking to even the Lee Summit North social media guy while I was there, and he was like, any time they had, a second down, it was like second and goal, they're like, got to go to Ike. They're going to Ike. They call Isaiah Ike. So it was just so funny, and I just looked at him, and he looked back at me, and he's like, best player on the team. I was like, yeah, he is. They put him everywhere, though, man. They handed the ball off to him. He was in the slot. He was outside. And it was cool because Devon Jordan matched up with him a lot. It was quality reps that they were getting. It's really cool to see in a scrimmage, a random scrimmage in Tulsa, Oklahoma, two top OU targets going after each other.
Yeah.
He's faster than I thought he was at one point. Speaking of Isaiah, I believe there was a camp that they did up at LSN a while back, and they were hand timing 40s, and Isaiah was timed at about a 4.45, 4.44, something like that, and that surprised me a little bit in a good way.
Yeah, well, I don't think he looks very fast because he runs so smooth. I mean, he's got a body type that does have a bit of like Jaleel Farouk to it, where he's just kind of like, I don't quite know how to describe it, but he's just extremely fluid in his routes. And like I said, good body type to him. He's going to grow up a little bit more. He's already 6'1", about 190. It's a body that Jerry Schmidt would love. So is Devon Jordan. His legs, the veins in his legs remind me of how they talk about Adrian Peterson. He's got horse veins in his legs. Schmidt's going to see his frame and his build and love that because he's already super long. So, but yeah, Mosey doesn't look fast, but I mean, you saw, I don't know if you guys saw the video I posted earlier before the live started, but I mean, he got by Jordan. Jordan's a quick guy too. So, yeah.
Well, sounds like we got a lot of nice targets in the pipeline, that you guys both saw tonight. Carl Albert, right? And then Travis and Lee Summit North at his alma mater is pretty cool. Wish I could go to some good football games up here, but we got a little bit of talent in Indianapolis. Not a ton. Not like Texas and Oklahoma. Some people think Oklahoma's like Nebraska. I'm never not going to say that. drives me nuts. But
Yeah, that argument is, if you make somebody actually expand on that argument, they can't do it, because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of why Nebraska has failed and why Oklahoma has been successful.
right,
Like, you have to fundamentally misunderstand those two things. And then if you try and explain, why those two things happen, then you'll answer the question for yourself. So, yeah, there's no lazier take in sports right now than Oklahoma will be the new Nebraska. No lazier.
crazily lazy. Cap, let me ask you this. Jesse James asked, speaking of Carl, that boy Sperry can spin it, huh? What did you see from the future OU signal caller tonight?
He has got, for lack of a better term, we hear the buzzword arm talent a lot, but he's definitely got that in spades. He's got an ability to pinpoint place the ball where he wants it at any point on the field. Doesn't matter where he wants to put it. If he wants to get it there, he's going to get it there. And the other thing that I noticed about him, even going back to some of the fall camps, or not the fall camps, the summer camps at OU that he attended, he was throwing to a lot of receivers that he's never worked with before. He doesn't have timing worked out. He still manages to place the ball exactly where it needs to be, catching guys in stride, fitting it into tight windows where there's a timing element to his throw that needs to happen. And so just his overall arm talent and ability is something that stands out every time I watch him, whether it's in person or on film. That was definitely true tonight. He has got a unique ability to throw the ball that just jumps off the page at you.
Yeah. The boy can spin it.
And keep in mind, I mean, he's not a senior yet. This is his junior year he's going into. It's insane to think about a kid his age with that kind of ability that's already honed in. I mean, the work that he's put in with Levy, with his teammates, combined with his natural ability, has put him in a position where it's crazy to think about not only what he's going to do this year, but excuse me, even as he gets into a senior year next year, where he's going to be at. And it's something that OU fans can definitely take some comfort in and find some joy in.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what Mosey said in his interview, right? He's like, man, he can spin it. He goes, he puts it right in the right place every time. It might, it would be fun to play with a guy like that and whatnot. And obviously, I think I align with some of the people in the industry that think OU leads there. I mean, it's when you get the guy talking about Kevin Sperry that glowingly, and knowing the OU ties that he has. Obviously Kamari Moore touched on, his ties with like a guy like Caden Green. The relationships are real at that school. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, and they were mentioned by everybody. Isaiah Mosey, of course, talked about his relationship with Emmett Jones, about how he's given him stuff to work on, help him with his game, stuff like that. It's, and even talking with Williams Nwaneri, he kept on bringing up relationships. I know a bunch of people like to sit there and say, well, relationships clearly don't matter, because they commit other places. It's just simply not true, man. Transfer portal, flip season, it all matters. There's a reason he was wearing OU stuff tonight, not Georgia. Relational, not transactional.
Facts. Relationships matter, Trav. Say it for the people in the back.
And Missouri stuff. He wasn't wearing any Missouri stuff either. And I get some people are like, well, black and gold doesn't, mix with their kind of red and white jerseys. It's like, there were kids wearing black cleats. Like, you're a 5-star. Like, what you wear is going to be reported nationally. You're the number one player in the country. If you wear a team's cleats and gloves to a scrimmage where OU reporters will be there because of Devon Jordan, Isaiah Mosey, and him, and Kamari Moore, and like you don't do that by accident, not just because you think they look cool.
He can wear his gloves if he wants to. I mean, that's a dumb excuse in my opinion. Like you said, you wear wherever you're going. Most of the time, you wear what they have. I'm not saying
right. There were 4 different people with OU gloves on today, all Sooner targets, 1 commit, 1 Missouri commit, and 2 outstanding targets. Kamari Moore, I know the chat's been asking, looked good. That boy is rotund. That dude, he's a big old boy. I think he'll grow up even another year. He's a force in the middle. Nwaneri even said in his interview he really likes playing next to Kamari because it makes his job so much easier. And just saying, those are his words, not mine.
Did you see Xavier Robinson throw that player like a rag doll?
Yes, he did. And more often than not, in the plays that I saw, the defensive players did not want any part of trying to tackle Robinson. He was like a steamroller.
Man, it's gonna be fun to see him at the next level. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, guys. We have any more questions? If not, then we'll get prepared to call it quits for this week, and we'll see you guys back here next week again, same time. But if anybody has any final questions as we prepare to head out, let us know so we can answer them. Lone Wolf throwing shots. He said the check didn't clear yet, so until then, it's Oklahoma gear.
Yeah, I knew that would rile everybody up.
All right, guys. Well, it doesn't look like we're getting any more questions. So, no this or that this week. No, I didn't have that plan for this week, but it will be coming back once the season starts. That's kind of the plan, having this or that when the season starts back up. Let's answer this real quick question from Caden Savage. Who you got, Aliho or Sean O'Malley? I must misunderstand. Do y'all know what he's talking about? No.
I can't say that I do.
Okay. Well, sorry, Caden. We don't know what you're talking about, dude. But all right, without further ado, then we'll head out here. Cat, man, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you being on and talking with me, chopping shop for a little bit, and being able to talk to Trav for a little bit as well. Where can the people find you, man? What do you want to say as you head out?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast. You can find me on Twitter at cap_405. You can also find the Crimson Captain account at crimson_cap. And then our website is crimsoncaptain.com.
You heard it there, crimsoncaptain.com. Go ahead and follow him on Twitter. Man, great follow. Definitely, worth your time to subscribe to him and the content that he gives, man. So again, thanks for coming on. Trav, what you got for the people, dog? You're on mute.
I got my shirt that TJ Eckert finally brought me. You can't beat oral. It's a baseball shirt, everybody. It's a baseball shirt. So, no.
Get your minds out of the gutter.
Congratulate everybody, but
Okay.
man, got to bring this intel. You know what I mean? Got to bring the intel. So
Have to.
I'm gonna go type something up on OU Insider real quick, and then I'm going to bed. It's been a long day.
Facts. Well, guys, I appreciate both of y'all, for doing this, and
Yes, sir.
both of y'all's hard work going out to. We all three were at different games tonight. You two got to see some football. I got to see some uninspiring volleyball from my own school tonight. We didn't play very well, so that's what I got to watch. But man, appreciate you guys' hard work and keeping things up to date and keep people up to date. So, man, we'll see you guys here next week. Same time, 9 p.m. Central Time. As always, Boomer.